and taking the time. And there is a difference in being a role player and coming in and playing a role and coming in off of an injury. There is a rhythm. But when you are Caitlin Clark and you have the ball in your hands and you are on the other team's scouting report, to come in half and not be able to be in that amount of, I would say, rhythm of the game, because the rhythm of the game changes towards the end of the year. And so when it started getting closer to the end of the regular season, I was like, it's dangerous to come back during playoff basketball because the whole flow, the physicality, all of that is different. And so I know it's difficult to kind of take time and understand the big picture, especially when you're living with tunnel vision and you've worked so hard to get to where you're at, but it's the smart thing. And I'm proud of this generation for taking the time they need, looking at the bigger picture, and making sure that they get healthy. So, Caitlin Clark, hope you feel better. You have a great off season and you come back.
What if I told you that the most powerful moment of Caitlin Clark's season didn't happen on the court, but off of it? Because in a single statement, Candace Parker, one of the greatest legends in WNBA history, may have just flipped the entire balance of power in women's basketball. See, the league wanted you to believe Caitlin Clark's season-ending announcement was nothing more than bad luck, an unfortunate injury, and a story we've seen before. But when Parker spoke out, she pulled the mask straight off the WNBA's carefully polished image. She confirmed what millions of fans had already suspected. This wasn't just about an injury. It was about exploitation, neglect, and a league that got drunk on Clark's fame but refused to protect the very player keeping them alive. Candace didn't offer friendly advice. She detonated a truth bomb. She gave Clark something far more powerful than sympathy. She gave her permission. Permission to say no. Permission to step away. And most importantly, permission to fight back. And that's where this story takes a sharp turn, because Clark's decision to shut down her season wasn't weakness, it wasn't surrender, it was a calculated strike. A move that left the WNBA exposed, bleeding relevance, and scrambling to hold on to the empire she built with her own hands. This is not a tragedy. This is not a sad ending to a rookie year. This is a rebellion. And Caitlin Clark just proved she has the power to burn the entire WNBA to the ground if she chooses. And tonight, we're going to connect every dot, from the moment Clark became the league's golden goose to the betrayal that turned her into its biggest threat, all the way to Candace Parker's explosive words that turned disappointment into revenge. By the end of this story, one thing will be clear. Caitlin Clark isn't just playing basketball anymore. She's waging a war, and the league she once saved may not survive it. Before Caitlin Clark, the WNBA was gasping for air. For years, the league had been fighting an uphill battle, empty arenas, flat TV ratings, and sponsors hesitant to bet big on a product that just couldn't seem to break through to the mainstream. Then Clark arrived, and overnight the landscape shifted. It wasn't just a spark, it was a cultural earthquake. They called it Caitlin Mania, and for good reason. Numbers don't lie, and the numbers around her were staggering. Games featuring Clark didn't just draw bigger crowds, they doubled them. The Indiana Fever's average attendance when she played shot up to nearly 17,000 fans. Without her, barely over 8,500. That's not a small boost, that's an 88% difference. The kind of swing most franchises only dream about. And it wasn't limited to the arena. On television, Clark's presence turned the WNBA into must-see viewing. Her games averaged more than 1.1 million viewers, shattering the league's normal ceiling. Meanwhile, games without her struggled to crack 400,000. Numbers so low they barely registered compared to the buzz Clark created. When she was forced off the court, the entire league's national viewership collapsed by 55%. That isn't growth, that's dependence. Caitlin Clark wasn't just another rookie, she was the business model. She was the golden goose, single-handedly dragging the WNBA into a new stratosphere of relevance and profitability. Sponsors took notice too. Household brands that had never given the WNBA a second glance suddenly lined up with million-dollar offers, eager to slap their logos next to Clark's. Media outlets that once buried women's basketball at the bottom of their sports coverage now led with her highlights. She was everywhere, on commercials, social feeds, billboards. For the first time in league history, the WNBA wasn't chasing relevance, it was living it, breathing it, selling it, and it all traced back to one name, Caitlin Clark. But here's the problem with golden geese. When you depend on one, you can't afford to lose it. You protect it at all costs. You build around it, you shield it, you nurture it, because if anything happens to it, the whole system collapses. And that's where the betrayal began, because instead of guarding Clark as their most valuable asset, the league did the unthinkable. They threw her to the wolves. From the very first moment Caitlin Clark set foot on a WNBA court, it was obvious she had a target on her back. Defenders didn't just play her tough, they hunted her. What should have been highlight reels of dazzling shots and sold-out arenas quickly turned into a string of viral clips showing Clark getting body-checked, shoved, elbowed, and knocked to the floor. And the crazy part was, none of it looked accidental. This wasn't normal rookie hazing. This was open season. Opponents treated her like she was stepping into a hockey rink instead of a basketball court. They threw elbows that would have drawn ejections in any other league. They jawed at her with trash talk that crossed every imaginable line. They made it clear, if she was going to be the face of the WNBA, they were going to make her bleed for it.
So where were the referees? Blind. Where was the league office? Silent. Instead of stepping in to protect their biggest star, they let the chaos unfold night after night. And why? Because conflict sells. Every hard foul, every scuffle, every headline about Clark struggling brought eyeballs. The league was more than happy to cash those checks, even if it meant Clark's body and career were the collateral. It wasn't just outsiders who noticed. Even her own teammate, Sophie Cunningham, couldn't hold her tongue. She called out the WNBA and its referees publicly, demanding they protect the player who was literally carrying the league on her back. And if a teammate has to beg the league to do its job, you know the system isn't just broken, it's corrupt. The result was inevitable. No matter how tough Clark was, no matter how iron-willed she seemed, no athlete can endure constant, unchecked physical punishment without breaking down. She wasn't being beaten by better basketball players. She was being beaten by a system that chose to sacrifice her for profit. And then the impossible happened. For the first time in her entire career, college or pro, Caitlin Clark couldn't go. The Iron Horse, the woman who never missed games, was sidelined. But this wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a coincidence. This was the direct cost of a league that saw her as a dollar sign instead of a human being. And in that moment, everything changed. Because Caitlin Clark wasn't just injured, she was betrayed. For years, Caitlin Clark had been defined by one thing: durability. She was the player who never sat, the competitor who refused to tap out, the warrior who played through exhaustion and pressure without flinching. At Iowa, she shouldered entire seasons on her back. In the WNBA, she was expected to do the same. Her body might have been bruised, but her willpower was iron. Until now. The moment she announced she couldn't play, the shockwaves were instant. Fans couldn't believe it. Reporters scrambled. Opponents, many of whom had taken shots at her all season, smirked quietly in the background. But when Caitlin Clark finally spoke, her words carried a chilling weight. She didn't rant. She didn't complain. She didn't point fingers. Instead, she did something even more powerful. She admitted what nobody thought possible. She needed to step away. She framed it as a matter of rest and recovery, but anyone really listening could hear the truth between the lines. This wasn't about one bad hit. This wasn't about fatigue. This was about everything. The constant targeting, the lack of protection, the relentless grind of being the WNBA's golden goose without any of the safeguards that should have come with it. In that single announcement, Clark shattered the illusion the league had worked so hard to build. The WNBA wanted fans to see an unstoppable star, untouchable and unbreakable. Instead, Clark showed that even the strongest player in the world has limits, and those limits had been crossed. Her fans rallied, flooding social media with outrage, demanding answers from the league. Why wasn't she protected? Why wasn't anyone stepping in? How could the WNBA risk the health of the one player bringing them relevance? But the league stayed silent, and that silence only made her decision louder. It wasn't just her body crying out, it was her spirit drawing a line in the sand. She was done being a punching bag, done being a pawn, done being fed to the wolves. This was more than an injury. This was the breaking point. And from here, the story wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about power, about money, about hypocrisy, and about a war that was about to spill far beyond the hardwood. When Caitlin Clark made the decision to shut it down, the league braced for criticism. They expected angry fans, maybe a few reporters asking tough questions, and then the storm passing. What they didn't expect was Candace Parker. Candace isn't just another voice in women's basketball, she's the voice. A two-time MVP, a finals MVP, an Olympic gold medalist, a player whose legacy is carved so deep that even the league's front office can't ignore her words. And when she opened her mouth about Caitlin Clark, the WNBA's entire PR machine crumbled. Because Parker didn't say what the league wanted. She didn't downplay the injury. She didn't call it unfortunate or part of the game. She looked directly into the camera and said what everyone else was too scared to admit. Caitlin Clark was being used. She pointed out the obvious. Clark's workload was unsustainable. Her treatment on the court was brutal, and the league had sat back and let it happen. She asked the question no executive dared to face. If this is how you treat the player carrying your league, what message are you sending to every other star? In that moment, Candace Parker did something Caitlin herself couldn't. She validated the suspicion burning in every fan's mind. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't random. This was negligence. And worse, it was greed.
Because let's be real, the WNBA cashed every check Clark's name printed. They sold out arenas. They broke TV records. They plastered her face on every highlight reel. But when it came to protecting her, to giving her even the basic respect of a whistle, they looked the other way. Candace exposed that hypocrisy in one devastating truth bomb. And here's why it mattered. Caitlin Clark wasn't alone anymore. For the first time, a legend with nothing to lose stood up and said what Clark couldn't. And that support didn't just echo, it roared. Fans saw Parker's words as confirmation. Media outlets spun it as a reckoning. Even Clark's critics had to pause, because when Candace Parker speaks, you don't brush it off. You listen. The league wanted control of the narrative, but Parker ripped it out of their hands and tossed it back to Clark, sharper and more powerful than ever. And that's where this story flips, from damage control to open rebellion. The second Candace Parker dropped her truth bomb, the ground shifted beneath the WNBA. Up until that moment, the league had all the power. They dictated the narrative. They decided what clips went viral, what storylines got pushed, and how Caitlin Clark was framed to the public. But Parker's words flipped the script, because suddenly, it wasn't the league speaking. It was a legend, someone untouchable, someone they couldn't silence with press releases or slick highlight packages. And the craziest part? Fans believed Parker more than they believed the WNBA itself. That's when the balance of power changed. Caitlin Clark, who had been cornered all season, targeted by vets, ignored by refs, squeezed by the schedule, was no longer isolated. With Parker's voice backing her, she transformed from a victim into a symbol of everything the league had gotten wrong. Sponsors started noticing too. The same companies that had poured money into Clark's image began asking uncomfortable questions. If the league couldn't protect its brightest star, how long before the money train derailed? How long before fans walked away? And make no mistake, this wasn't just about basketball anymore. This was about leverage. For the first time in its history, the WNBA wasn't holding the upper hand over its biggest star, Caitlin Clark. was holding it over them. Because think about it. If Clark had decided to step away permanently, the league's record-breaking ratings would have cratered overnight. Ticket sales? Gone. National buzz? Gone. The WNBA would have been forced to admit the reality they've always tried to hide. Without Clark, their empire collapses. And that knowledge gave Caitlin Clark something she hadn't had all season: control. Every move she made now carried weight. Every silence, every statement, every appearance. It all reminded the WNBA who really built the momentum of this season. It wasn't the refs, it wasn't the veterans, it wasn't the front office. It was Caitlin Clark. And the league had just pushed her to the point where she realized it. The power shift was complete. For the first time, the WNBA needed Caitlin Clark more than she needed them. And that's when the story took an even darker turn. Because power doesn't just reveal the truth, it exposes enemies. By now, Caitlin Clark had already flipped the entire league upside down. The WNBA could no longer pretend her absence was just bad luck. The sponsors knew it, the fans knew it, and thanks to Candace Parker, the players knew it too. But here's the part that really terrified the league. Clark still had one move left. The move nobody thought she'd even consider. The nuclear option. Because Caitlin Clark doesn't have to play in the WNBA. That's the dirty secret nobody at the top wants to admit. She's bigger than the league itself. If she wanted to, she could walk away tomorrow, sign overseas, partner directly with sponsors, or even build her own platform. And she'd still be one of the most famous athletes in the world. And that possibility? That's what keeps executives up at night. Think about it. The NBA has power because its stars are tied to the system. LeBron, Steph, Giannis, they need the league. But Caitlin Clark, she's different. She's not locked in. She has the attention of millions, the backing of billion-dollar brands, and the voice of legends like Candace Parker amplifying her message. And here's the kicker. Fans would follow her anywhere. If Clark ever decided the WNBA wasn't worth it, arenas would empty, TV ratings would collapse, the league's so-called growth spurt would look like a house of cards falling in slow motion. And deep down, the veterans who resented her, the officials who ignored her, and the executives who cashed her checks all know it.
That's why her silence after Parker's comments felt so dangerous. She didn't lash out. She didn't promise to come back stronger. She let the world sit with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't come back at all. And that silence was the nuclear option. Because in that moment, Caitlin Clark didn't have to say a word. The WNBA realized that their survival depended on the very player they had failed to protect. The question now wasn't if Caitlin Clark could burn the system down, it was whether she would choose to. The fight between Caitlin Clark and the WNBA was never just about hard fouls or missed whistles. It wasn't even just about one injury or one season. It was about something much larger, something the league never saw coming. Because when Candace Parker spoke, and when Clark drew her line in the sand, the battle instantly expanded beyond the court. Suddenly, this wasn't just Caitlin versus jealous veterans. It wasn't just her against unfair refs. It was her against an entire system, one that had gotten away with mediocrity for decades, until Clark showed up and shattered the ceiling. The bigger war is about ownership of the future. Who controls women's basketball? Is it the league, with its executives and old guard politics? Or is it the stars, the ones whose names actually sell tickets, fill arenas, and make people care? For the first time ever, that question has a real answer, and it isn't the league. Because Caitlin Clark has already proven she can carry the sport on her back. She's done what no commissioner, no marketing team, no veteran ever could. And now, with the nuclear option hanging in the air, she doesn't just have influence, she has dominance. And here's the scary part for the WNBA. This isn't just about Caitlin anymore. Other players are watching. Younger stars are paying attention. Sponsors are rethinking where their loyalty lies. If Clark wins this war, it changes everything. The next generation won't be chained to the league's old rules. They'll see that the power doesn't belong to the front office. It belongs to the players and the fans who follow them. The league thought they were building a star, but instead, they built their biggest rival. And if they don't adapt, if they don't finally protect and respect the very players they profit from, Caitlin Clark won't just expose their flaws, she'll lead a revolution that ends them. Because this isn't just basketball anymore. This is business. This is power, and this is war. So here's the reality. Caitlin Clark didn't just sit out the rest of the season. She sent a message that shook the foundations of the WNBA and exposed the truth they've tried to hide for years. She reminded everyone who holds the power. She reminded the league who really drives their revenue, their ratings, their relevance. But make no mistake, the war is far from over. The season may be over for her, but her battle has just begun. The WNBA is staring down the very player they once exploited, and now she holds all the cards. Ratings are down, sponsors are nervous, fans are restless, and Clark? She's planning her next move in silence, with the full knowledge that the league needs her far more than they need them. The real cliffhanger isn't whether she'll be back, it's if. What if Clark decides to walk away entirely? What if she takes her talent overseas or builds a platform that makes the WNBA irrelevant? What if other stars see her stand and realize they have the same power? This isn't just a story about a single season. It's a story about power, leverage, and the reckoning of a league that thought it could profit off its best player without consequence. Caitlin Clark has drawn the line, and now everyone is forced to choose a side. The question isn't, when will she be back? The real question keeping every executive up at night is, will she ever come back? And when the next chapter unfolds, the answer could change the WNBA forever.